They put him in the ground and walked away. But the grave they dug wasn't deep enough, because what happened after that night didn't just change Daniel. It redefined him. A broke 21-year-old who disappeared from the world without a trace silently became the most dangerous thing his enemies never saw coming. And here's the question nobody asks. What does a man become when he has nothing left to lose? Most people who get knocked down fight to get back to where they were. Daniel didn't want that. He wanted something those people had never seen, something they had no defense against. But to understand what he built, you first have to understand what they took. Daniel was 21, not lazy, not careless, just poor in the way that doesn't make noise. The kind of poor that wakes up before sunrise, that works 2 jobs and still counts coins at the end of the month. That carries weight quietly, because complaining never fed anyone. He had just buried his father. No inheritance, no safety net, no one coming to help. Just a small piece of undeveloped land on the edge of town. Nothing impressive from the outside. No structure, no obvious value, just soil and silence. But 2 days before his father died, the old man had gripped Daniel's hand so tight it hurt and said something Daniel would carry for the rest of his life. Whatever happens, whatever they offer you, don't sell that land, not for any price. Daniel didn't fully understand it then. He just nodded, made the promise, and kept it, even when keeping it cost him everything. His girlfriend Sonia had been with him through all of it. 3 years, the struggles, the late nights, the conversations about a future that kept feeling further away. She wasn't cruel, she was just tired, and tired people eventually make tired decisions. Every week, the same questions. When does it get better, Daniel? Other men are moving forward. That land is sitting there doing nothing. He heard her, every word. He just didn't have better answers yet. Only a promise he intended to keep, and a quiet belief that the right moment was coming. He just needed more time. But time was the one thing Sonia had run out of. Then one afternoon, 3 men in suits arrived. Calm, professional, generous, representing a company with a name that sounded important. They made Daniel an offer for the land. More money than he had ever seen written on paper. Life-changing numbers. For a moment, his hands went cold. His mind started moving. What could I do with this? But then his father's voice cut through everything, and Daniel looked them in the eye. It's not for sale. The men smiled politely, thanked him, left. But something behind their eyes didn't leave with them. What Daniel didn't know was that beneath that land, geological surveys had already confirmed rare mineral deposits, the kind that made companies move quietly, that made men dangerous. They hadn't come to negotiate. They'd come to measure how stubborn he was. And when the answer was very, they stopped asking and started planning. Sonia got a call 3 days later from a man at the company. They met somewhere private. And in that conversation, a decision was made. One that would change all of their lives in ways none of them could fully predict. Daniel doesn't remember much about that evening. A drink that tasted slightly off. A conversation that felt strange around the edges. Then nothing. Cold. Pressure on every side. A tightness in his chest he couldn't explain. He tried to move. Couldn't. Tried to speak. Dirt filled his mouth. And in the complete and absolute darkness, his mind told him what his body already knew. He was underground. Panic doesn't arrive slowly. It floods. Every nerve screaming at once. Lungs burning. fingers clawing at nothing. This was how a 21-year-old with a broken life and one piece of land was supposed to disappear, quietly, permanently, forgotten. But Daniel's hands kept moving. Hours later, a hand broke through the soil, fingers first, then a wrist, then an arm. Daniel pulled himself out of the ground, gasping like a man being born for the second time, covered in dirt, shaking, barely alive. He lay on his back and stared at the open sky, just breathing, just existing. And in that silence, something inside him permanently changed. He didn't call the police. He didn't go back to Sonia. He didn't confront the company. He made one decision: disappear, not out of fear, out of strategy. Because Daniel understood something in that moment that most people never learn. Exposing your enemy when you're weak only gives them time to finish the job. So he vanished, and in that silence, he got to work. Daniel had almost nothing, a few $100s, a phone, and more clarity than he'd ever had in his life. He started studying, not casually, obsessively, financial statements, market cycles, how money actually moves versus how poor people think it moves. He studied the way a man studies something when his life depends on it, because his did. His first move was the stock market. Small, deliberate, controlled. He didn't chase trends, didn't follow noise, didn't listen to people who talked loudly about money, but had very little of it. He picked one sector he understood better than most analysts sitting in glass offices far away: land, resources, infrastructure. He had lived near that land his whole life. He knew things spreadsheets couldn't tell you. He bought positions nobody was watching. And then he did something most people are completely incapable of. He waited. Patience wasn't his backup plan. It was the plan. 6 months later, his first real return landed. Not life-changing money, but proof. Proof that the system worked, if you worked it correctly. He reinvested everything, every single dollar. Lived like he was still in that empty apartment, still counting coins, still eating like a man with nothing. Because sacrifice now meant options later. 18 months in, Daniel spotted something everyone else had already walked away from. A small logistics company, 2 locations, bleeding money publicly, investors disappearing one by one. But Daniel didn't see a failure. He saw a misdiagnosis. The infrastructure was solid. The client base was loyal. The contracts were real. The only problem was leadership. Wrong people making wrong decisions on a right foundation. He approached quietly, made an offer so low it was almost insulting. They accepted, because a low offer from someone willing beats no offer from someone gone. Daniel didn't rush in. He watched first. 2 months of just watching. Then he made one change. Replaced the operations manager. Brought in someone hungry, someone with something to prove. Within 6 months, the bleeding stopped. Within a year, the company was profitable. 14 months after buying in, he sold his stake for 8 times what he paid. He didn't celebrate. He calculated what came next. He entered real estate the same way he entered everything. Through the back door, quietly, where nobody was looking. Not luxury, not glamour. Distressed properties in transitioning neighborhoods. Areas where the infrastructure was improving, but the perception hadn't caught up yet. He bought where nobody wanted to be seen buying. Renovated quietly, held strategically. And when the neighborhood finally caught up to what he already knew, the value followed. Because Daniel understood something most people miss. Real estate doesn't reward excitement. It rewards patience, property after property, each one chosen like a chess move, not for what it was, for what it was about to become. Money opened doors, but Daniel knew doors alone weren't enough. You needed the right people on the other side. So he started showing up in rooms he had no business being in. Industry events, private dinners, closed-door investment meetings. He didn't talk much. He listened, asked sharp questions, remembered everything, and slowly, the right people started remembering him. A developer who needed a capital partner, a founder needing operational expertise, a retiring businessman with a portfolio he wanted managed quietly. Daniel became the man people called when they didn't want the wrong people knowing their business. Discreet, reliable, dangerous in exactly the right way. And here's what nobody talks about. It wasn't the strategies that built Daniel's wealth. Plenty of people know the strategies. It was what he refused to do. He refused to tell people his plans before they were finished. He refused to upgrade his lifestyle the moment money arrived. He refused to make emotional decisions. Every time he felt the urge to react, he paused, breathed, asked himself one question: does this move build the next move? If the answer was no, he didn't move. That discipline, that patience, that willingness to delay everything, that was the real asset. The businesses and the properties were just the result. 3 years in, Daniel sat alone in an office that was finally his. Not rented, not borrowed, his. He looked at the numbers on the screen, really looked at them, and realized the machine was running without him. Money making money while he slept. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, his father's land deed, looked at it for a long time, put it back. Not yet. He still had one thing left to do. One morning, a convoy of black cars moved slowly through the city, pulled up in front of a building with a name Daniel had memorized a long time ago. Employees gathered at windows, confused, nervous. The lead door opened. A man stepped out, clean, still, certain. The kind of presence that doesn't announce itself, because it doesn't need to. It was Daniel. The boy they buried had spent years buying their future, quietly, share by share, board seat by board seat, so carefully, so patiently, that by the time they noticed, it was already done. He didn't just walk into their building, he owned it. The manager who made the call that night was terminated within the hour, publicly escorted out. His reputation destroyed so completely, the industry never heard his name again. Sonia reached out 3 weeks later, long message, explaining, apologizing, saying she didn't know how far they'd go, saying she still thought about him. Daniel read it once, put his phone down, and never replied. Not out of cruelty, but because the version of him that needed that closure no longer existed. And maybe that's what they never understood. When they put him in the ground, they thought they were ending a story. They were writing the most important chapter of it. Because some people, when you strip everything away, don't collapse. They get quiet, they get focused, they build in the dark, until the dark isn't enough to hide what they've become. Daniel didn't win because he was lucky. He won because he made a decision the night he crawled out of that grave, that he would never again be in a position where someone else controlled his future. And he kept that promise. So if you're in a difficult place right now, if someone betrayed you, if someone left you, If someone decided your story was over before it started, let them believe that. Go quiet, go dark, because the most dangerous version of you isn't the one that's angry. It's the one that got patient and started building.